Good afternoon, everyone. I'll quickly introduce myself. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm Sunita Singh Dalal, and I head up the private client and wealth management team at Stephenson Harwood here in the Middle East. And one of the reasons why we thought it would be tremendously useful to have this conversation during the current times is obviously because of the global instability that we all face. We won't bore you with too much detail, but I think the slide that deals with the statistics showing we just get to that in a minute. There you go. The slide speaks for itself in terms of who is migrating, from where and why. Thanks to our friends at Knight Frank, who always do a tremendous job with fine-tuning and gathering data as best as they can. The slides, as you can see here, in terms of ultra-high net worth individuals holding passports, has certainly seen an increase. And bearing in mind, in the current times, these statistics will without a doubt be enhanced. But of course, visibility on data at the moment is fairly challenging. What we have seen, just moving on, is a considerable amount of movement in the Latin countries. One of the reasons for that possibly is due to unstable economies and due to the fact that it's becoming easier now for people to move on and take advantage of their Spanish descent. At this point in time, of course, the obvious reasons for people to look for alternative solutions are the political instability and persecution. And by that, I mean not only just what we see on a day-to-day basis, but perhaps what we've seen happening for quite a few years. Countries on the African continent and in the Middle East, citizens really do need to have alternative options so that they can avail of basic fundamental amenities and services such as education and a better delivery of healthcare. But also, as we continue to become more and more global in terms of business, access to what we call refined and more sophisticated and transparent business infrastructures and economies are very, very important. Some of you may or may not be too familiar with Stephenson Harwood. I'll hand over to my partner Emily Osborne in London, and then you'll shortly meet other members of our teams who are based in the Far East and in Europe. And we'll just showcase some of our offering for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. So very briefly, for those that don't know us, we are Stephenson Harwood, which is a law firm with over 1,000 people worldwide. We are headquartered in London, but we have offices across Asia, Europe, and as Anita said, in the Middle East. We also have an integrated local law capability in Singapore, and you will be hearing from one of our associates in our Singapore team shortly. We are a full-service law firm, provide corporate finance, litigation, employment, marine international trade, real estate, and private wealth assistance. Today's speakers are all parts of the private wealth team, and I'm going to let Mohammed tell you about Range when we get to his later in the webinar. He can tell you more about what he does. But Stephenson Harwood, our private wealth team, advise under the laws of the UK, UAE, France, Hong Kong, USA, Canada, and Singapore. We have a variety of languages spoken by the team, as on the slide there. And we cover a wide variety of issues, sort of everything that you may need advice on: succession planning, tax, immigration, philanthropy, real estate, art, private jets, yachts, and all types of family or trust disputes. And we have a particular focus on complex international structuring, especially where there's family business or corporate structure. But today we're going to be talking about our immigration capability and more particularly what the options are for people who are looking for a second citizenship or visa. First we're going to start in Europe, and I'm going to hand you over to Kimia from our London team to tell you about the options available in Europe.
Thank you, Emily. So yeah, I'm the immigration consultant. As Emily said, I'm based in the London office. During my part of this webinar, I'm just going to discuss one of the main UK visa options and also discuss some alternative options to obtain residency and citizenship in some of the EU countries. So to begin with, I'll start with the Tier 1 investor visa, which is a UK visa. With this visa route, migrants can apply for a visa which is a 5-year visa and will lead to indefinite leave to remain, which is permanent residency in the UK. And the requirements of this visa is that a migrant can show that they've got access to £2 million. So these funds have to be held in the migrant's personal bank account for 2 consecutive years prior to the date that they apply for the visa, or alternatively, if they can show the source of funds. Source of funds can be if the funds are gifted to them, sale of a property, from a business, etc. The second requirement is that they can show, obtain a criminal record check from any country they've resided at in the past 10 years, if they've resided out of the country for more than 12 months. The third requirement is that they open an investment account with a UK regulated bank or financial institution for the purpose of investing the funds upon the grant of the visa. So the bank or financial institution, once they've opened the account, will issue a letter to the migrant, which will be submitted alongside the visa application. Once the visa application has been submitted and the visa has subsequently been granted, there are requirements for the migrant to invest the funds. And these funds have to be invested in share capital or loan capital in an active and trading UK registered company. So an active and trading UK registered company has been defined in the immigration rules as a company that has registered with Companies House in the UK, that it's registered with HMRC for corporation tax and PAYE. Thirdly, that it's opened up or has a UK bank account and accounts that show regular trading of its goods and services. And the fourth requirement is that it has at least 2 UK-based employees who are not directors of the company. It should be noted that the funds cannot be invested in companies mainly engaged in property investment, property management, and property development. So the next slide is a timeline of a migrant's journey to British nationality. With this visa, a migrant has to show that they've invested the full £2 million within the first 3 months. This initial visa will be granted for a period of 3 years if the application is made from inside the UK, or 3 years and 4 months if the application is made from outside the UK. So once the initial investment is made, they have to maintain that investment for the first 3 years to be awarded an extension of their leave for a further 2 years, which brings them up to year 5. If at year 5 they can show they've maintained the investment throughout that 5-year period, and they also meet an additional residence requirement whereby they show that they've not been absent from the UK for more than 180 days in any 12-month period, they'll be granted indefinite leave to remain. It should also be noted that for indefinite leave to remain in the UK, a migrant will also need to pass an English language test. You would note that wasn't a requirement for the initial visa application. 12 months after being granted indefinite leave to remain, a migrant can also apply to naturalise as a British national, therefore at year 6, and apply for a British passport afterwards. So this route does lead to permanent residency in the UK. The next slide shows accelerated routes to migrants. So depending on the level of investment, a migrant can accelerate the date in which they could be granted indefinite leave to remain. So again, you'll see the initial investment has to be made within 3 months. But if a migrant is looking to apply for indefinite leave to remain after 2 years, they have to invest the full 10 million within the first 3 months. Alternatively, they've got the option of investing 5 million and they'll be awarded indefinite leave to remain after 3 years. Again, the investments have to be maintained, but they can apply for British nationality at year 5 rather than year 6. So the next slide shows the benefits of this visa. So as mentioned, it has some route to indefinite leave to remain, there are accelerated routes, and there's a route to British nationality. Another advantage is that a migrant can include their dependent spouses, partners, and children under the age of 18. No additional investment is required per dependent. 2 million will cover the whole family. This visa gives the migrant the flexibility to live, work, and for the children to study in the UK, but there is no requirement as such for the migrant to work or set up their own business here. So that's the UK investor visa. There are alternative UK visas which do enable migrants to come to the UK if their intention is to set up a business in the UK, or alternatively, if they're a senior employee of an overseas company, they can set up a branch or subsidiary here. The investor visa is quite a popular visa for high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. There's also options for migrants to obtain residency and citizenship in EU countries. So as Sunita mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, some individuals are looking to obtain a second passport, and these schemes are good if that's a migrant's intention. So to start with, I'll discuss and give an overview of the Scheme for Cyprus, which is a citizenship investment programme. So a migrant is required to directly invest 2 million, and this investment can be made in real estate, land development and infrastructure, and it can also be made in companies and organisations based in Cyprus. Popular investment is 2 million in real estate. In addition to that, an applicant is required to privately own a property in Cyprus of the value of no less than 500,000 euros, and this property has to be maintained for the duration of the period that they hold a passport for Cyprus. In addition to that, there's also a requirement that a total of 150,000 euros is donated to the Promotion of Research Foundation and to the Cyprus Land Development Corporation for the promotion of affordable housing plan. There is a route in Cyprus to obtain the passport within 6 months of these investments being made, and a fast track option is available to some migrants to obtain the passport within 3 months. These investments have to be maintained for at least 5 years. Obtaining a passport for Cyprus has many, many advantages, some of which have been listed on this slide. The first one, of course, it's a passport for the EU. It allows ease of travel and free movement across the EU. In addition to that, the passport and the nationality can subsequently pass on to future generations. Another advantage is that there's no residence requirement for the migrant to actually be present in Cyprus for a specific number of days per year to maintain that nationality or to even get the nationality. There's no language competence requirement, and there's no restriction on nationalities. Some schemes will restrict certain nationalities from applying under their citizenship investment programs. Another advantage is that dependents can be included under this scheme. So we mentioned with the UK investor visa, it's dependents under the age of 18. Whereas this route allows dependents up until the age of 28 if that dependent is under full-time education. This route also allows an applicant to include their own parents as dependents. The level of investment does vary depending on the number of dependents though. Another advantage is if an individual is looking to obtain this passport to allow them to either live in the UK or to work in the UK, if they invest within the next couple of months, they're able to obtain the passport through fast track service and get the passport before the end of this year. They can enter the UK as an EU national before the 31st of December 2020 to qualify under the EU settlement scheme, which will allow them to remain in the UK for a period of 5 years before then obtaining settled status, which is the equivalent of indefinite leave to remain. That's one example of an EU country which offers a citizenship investment programme to obtain a passport. Portugal is an example of an EU country which also offers a route to obtain residency in Portugal. So here I've listed some of the investment options for the Portugal Golden Visa. Portugal offer an investment of purchasing a property for the value of 500,000 euros or above, and you must either maintain this property for 30 years or alternatively investment can be made in property located in a designated urban area, and the refurbishments of that property must equate to at least 350,000 euros or above. Another option is that there can be a capital investment of 1.6 million euros. 600,000 euros must be invested, and this is a set list of what the investments have to be made into. It's investment in artistic production or supporting the arts for renovation or maintenance of the national cultural heritage through public authorities. And part of that £600,000 investment will also be invested in research activities conducted by public or private scientific research institutions. The 1 million euros is to be invested in, so I've put here, but there's a few more options. Capital in Portuguese companies, it could be shares on the stock market, or it can be a bank deposit in a Portuguese bank. Unlike Cyprus, Portugal does have a requirement that an applicant is resident in Portugal for 7 days within the first 12 months and 14 days in the subsequent 2-year period. Some of these investments have to be maintained for 5 years. And it does also lead to a route to Portuguese nationality after a period of residency and holding a permanent residency under the Portuguese Golden Visa. So they're just examples of a couple of the EU countries to offer these. There are, of course, many others. Malta, for instance, which is bringing out a revised scheme in September. Bulgaria, Romania, Spain, these just to name a few. But these are just an overview of some of the schemes which are available. That's my part done, so I can pass on to you.
Thank you, Camilla.
Yes,
now
thank you.
we're going to move on to Yi, who is going to tell us about the Singapore Global Investor Programme.
Yes,
Over
thank
to
you so
you,
much,
Yi.
Emily. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Camilla. And now I will be sharing with you. So I'm Yi Li. I sit with the Singapore Private Wealth team. And in the next 15 minutes, I will be taking you through some of the residency options that are in Singapore. So this is the agenda that we have for the next 15 minutes. I will first set and give you a brief overview on the different pathways to residency in Singapore. That will be a comparison between the Global Investor Program, which is a PR scheme, versus certain types of work visas available, which is the Entre Pass as well as the Employment Pass. And thereafter, the focus today would be on the Global Investor Program, where I will share with you an overview as well as the investment options, some of the key changes that came in this year in March, and with a focus on option C, which is the option of investment by way of a family office. So Singapore has always been a popular destination for people to work, to live, and to play and to travel to. And this is just some of the many main reasons as to why Singapore is a popular choice. It's because of political stability, and we have a strong rule of law. We are strategically located well in the region, and there's great access for investments around the region in the Southeast Asia or even to Asia or further up. We also have a skilled and multilingual workforce, a good standard of living, a good education system, which makes it attractive for families to relocate to move with their families. And also, we also have low taxes and an attractive tax regimes in Singapore. So here we have a summary of different pathways to residency in Singapore. We have the Global Investor Program, which I have mentioned, it's a PR scheme, and we have the Entree Pass and the Employment Pass, which are essentially work visas. To share a little bit more on the Entree Pass and the Employment Pass, the Entree Pass are applicable for entrepreneurs looking to create businesses in Singapore. There are three main categories of people we look at: the entrepreneurs, innovators, as well as investors. While this is one of the many schemes available for investors as well as entrepreneurs, we do not really see many people actually applying under the scheme in recent years because there is a fast-track route to PR, which is under the Global Investor Program, and there is actually an easier way of, if you would just, your intention is to actually move to Singapore just for employment purposes. The Employment Pass is one of the most popular ones for professionals and skilled workers. I have also set up some pros and cons between the GIP scheme compared to the work passes. The GIP scheme, of course, you get permanent residency quicker. Usually we're looking at about a 1 year mark where you obtain residency. Well, for the work visas, you would have to first get the work visa and maintain it for at least 2 years before you can apply for permanent residency under another scheme. It is also easier for you to renew your PR status under the Global Investor Program as compared to a PR that as compared to your work visas, where the renewal will take place every 1 to 2 years, or it depends on employment with the company that you're with. The cons, however, of the GIP scheme is that there is financial entry requirements as compared to the Entree Pass and Employment Pass, where it's a little bit lower. And in the next slide, we'll talk about the Global Investor Program. So what is the Global Investor Program? It is a PR scheme, fast-track route that was introduced in 2004 and administered by Context Singapore, which is a division of the Economic Development Board of Singapore. The GIP scheme awards Singapore permanent residency status to eligible global investors who wants to drive their businesses and create businesses and invest in Singapore. So in order to qualify for it, you need to meet certain qualifying requirements and thereafter fulfill your investment requirements, and then you will be able to obtain PR status. And in the next slide, we have the list of approved industries recognized by the EDB under the Global Investor Program. There are currently now 25 industries, and I'll give you some time to just run through the 25 different areas that we focus on. So to give you an example, if you are looking to set up a family office and you are doing investments, financial investments, you would apply under the approved industry of family office and financial services. For example, if you are in a textile business, then you'll be looking to apply under consumer business. And if you're in the mining industry, then you'll be looking to apply under natural resources industry. And in the next slide, so under the Global Investor Program, we are looking at an investment amount of 2.5 million. And you have three options, which is option A, an investment into a new or existing business entity. You have option B, which is an investment into a GIP approved fund. And currently now, there are only 2 funds available for investment into. And we have option C, which used to exist, but since March this year, it became publicly available, which is an investment into a new and existing Singapore-based family office. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this year in March, there were new changes being introduced into the GIP scheme. What it has essentially done is it has created greater categories of persons who are eligible under the scheme. Previously, the scheme was only available for established business owners, where you need to be an entrepreneur with a track record of at least 5 years in whichever approved industry you were in. I think over time, we have recognized that the second generation have been starting to step up to take over the business. And they tend to always fall foul on the requirement of having a good long track record in the business. And hence, we have now introduced 3 new categories of persons who are eligible to apply under the GIP. We have the next generation business owners, founders of fast growth companies, as well as family office principals. Although we have now increased the categories of people eligible, the requirements under the GIP scheme have actually been scaled up to make it a little bit more stringent. For example, the old scheme allowed for established business owners. It used to have, for one of the main entry requirements was that the company needs to have an annual business turnover of 50 million, and that has now been scaled up to 200 million. For the next generation business owners, as well as founders of fast growth company, the annual AUM that we are looking at as an entry eligibility criteria would be 500 million. And this actually makes the family office principles option C really popular nowadays, because with the change introduced in March, it actually removed one of the requirements, which is where the individual or the family needs to have at least 400 million in net worth. And that has since been removed. And the investment criteria actually has been kept the same, which is 2.5 million. And you need to have a minimum AUM of 200 million. And moving on, we have some of the commonly asked questions about the Global Investor Program. One of the main questions is, so what is the timeline for me to get PR? It will usually take anywhere between 9 to 12 months. What would happen is you would make an application and you would give them an assessment period of about 4 to 6 months. That is where you would hear back and you'll be invited for an interview. It would be more to share a little bit of your business plans with the EDB. And thereafter, you'll be issued an approval in principle, where your investment of 2.5 million would have to be made within 6 months of the date of that letter. So depending on how fast you make the investment, then your PR status will be finalized. And so it ranges anywhere from 9 to 12 months. Another commonly question we get asked quite often is, can I bring my spouse and my children, and can they get PR under the scheme too? The answer is yes. You can, as a main applicant, include your spouse as well as children below 21 years old into the application. As to other family members, such as parents-in-law, parents, or even children who are a bit older, then you would be able to get them a long-term visit pass, which usually would be granted for a 5-year period. Another important point to note, and also a question that we always get asked very often, is there a requirement for someone to reside in Singapore holding a PR? The answer is yes. The main applicant and dependents will have to spend at least half of the time in Singapore. There has to be a genuine intention for them to reside, as it will really impact upon the renewal status that you get later on once the PR, you need to renew your re-entry permit after 5 years. And in my last slide, I just wanted to focus a little bit more as to the benefits I shared with you earlier on. There are 3 options, and option A, B, and C. And why option C now, we do see great interest in it, even after the revision in March this year. It's because, firstly, we took away the net worth requirement, and we have gotten clarification as to the AUM 200 million that has to be managed by the family office. Essentially, 50 million would have to be onshore in Singapore, while 150 million can be kept offshore. And on top of it, a family office, it is quite very attractive in Singapore, is due to the various tax exemptions that's being granted to the fund managed by the family office. I won't go into further details today about it, but just to share with you briefly, this tax exemption exempts all forms of specified income from certain lists of investments made by the fund, and which gives the fund to be a complete tax exempted structure. And more importantly, why is the GIP option C so much better as compared, and people prefer it, is because you would be able to renew your PR status longer as compared to a normal work pass, and compared to the other schemes that are available out there. And with that, I end my session.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Yi, and that was tremendously useful from the other part of the perspective. And now we will kind of depart from our usual pure SH presentational style and actually welcome on board a very special guest, Mr. Mohammed Asaria, who's the Managing Director of Range Developments. And one of the reasons for having Mohammed here today to join us was to again showcase the variety of options that are available to clients of varying categories, but for whom investment migration is something that is very topical and important. And we wanted to make sure that in addition to the Far East and the European options, we cover something a little more tropical and exotic for you. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mohammed. And Mohammed, perhaps you could start off with telling us a little bit about the genesis of Range Developments, why you had all got together and created it, and what have you achieved to date. And then what I'll do, if I may, is I'll interject in between and ask you a couple of other questions that will help you demonstrate and illustrate what you are offering citizens at the moment.
Sure. Thank you, and good morning, Sunita, and good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, we really appreciate the opportunity to present this afternoon with the Stephenson Harwood team. We've worked closely with Stephenson Harwood and Sunita for some time, and we highly recommend them as one of the most reputable law firms in the City of London and now all over the world for your citizenship and your other private wealth requirements. Range Development. So I started this company in 2012 and really stumbled upon the whole concept of citizenship by investment by pure chance. Someone suggested that I needed to obtain citizenship from the lovely island of St. Kitts because of the global mobility options that it provided individuals. And really, it was that chance conversation which led to the creation of this company. And more so, adding to this, St. Kitts, I don't know if the audience know, but St. Kitts and Nevis was the first island or first country in the world to come up with citizenship by investment after its independence in 1983, where the then government required a source of revenue after independence from the crown, and they started focusing on citizenship by investment. And from there, the concept has spread globally to where we are now, where citizenship is really in the mainstream and has really become an industry in its own right. So that's the background of Range Developments. And over the past, it's nearly a decade now since we've been active in this space. We've completed 2 hotel projects, the Park Hyatt in St. Kitts and the Kempinski in Dominica. Both of those hotels have been listed as some of the best globally. The Park Hyatt St. Kitts was named as the best new hotel in the Caribbean by CNN in 2017. It was on the Condé Nast Hot List in 2018. Maybe if we could scroll 2 slides forward. I'm just having some challenges moving the slides forward. And as you can see, these are spectacular institutionalized hotel assets, which would find themselves at home in any leading resort destination. Both of our projects are funded through the Citizenship by Investment programs of St. Kitts and Dominica. Dominica, we started our development in 2016. We opened the resort in 2019 to similar reviews as we've achieved in St. Kitts. And we've really become known as the leading developer. We've had 1,600 families trust us with their citizenship journey. Over 4,000 individuals have obtained second citizenship through our projects. And equally important, and what we really focus on, is we create economic benefit for the islands in which we work. Both of these assets, as I mentioned, their institutional quality, they've put a halo effect on tourism in both of the relevant islands. And we've had the privilege of creating over 2,300 jobs through the use of second citizenship in these countries, which also provides many benefit for the country as well, not just for the investor.
Quite. No, thanks for that, Mohammed. And I think what's really important for listeners and advisors to note is that, most importantly, you've got a very successful delivered complete track record in terms of delivering a product end to end, and that as hoteliers, as well as working on the investment by migration scheme, you've really contributed to the island. So in terms of what you've completed in St. Kitts and Dominica, that's fantastic. But tell us more about what's going on now in the Caribbean island of Grenada, and why is that important, especially now, actually, for people who are looking for migration options?
Sure. So we were invited to the island of Grenada at the end of 2018. Grenada has had a citizenship option for close to 2 decades, but it really hadn't gained prominence. So we worked with the government to restructure the program, and we've seen the benefits of that in the last, I'd say, 9 months, and even more so in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. So if you look at the Caribbean citizenship programs, you can obtain citizenship within a 3 to 4 month period. It requires a detailed desktop due diligence, submission of a number of documents, which are then reviewed by the Citizenship by Investment Unit. They send it out to private third-party due diligence, as well as carrying out non-civilian checks of the individual. So no one should come away from this thinking it's a pay-and-play scheme. Diligence is front and center, because the longevity of these programs depend on the integrity of the applicant who is applying. And within 3 to 4 months, 97% of applicants are generally of good character. They obtain their second citizenship, and that provides visa-free travel to 140 countries around the world, approximately. UK, Schengen, Russia, most of Asia, most of Latin America. So it has great ability for global migration. Grenada has an added advantage in that it has visa-free travel to China, which is important for a number of individuals. Now, where Grenada really differs from the other Caribbean countries which are engaged in second citizenship is it has a unique benefit in that citizens of Grenada can invest and live in the United States through taking advantage of the Grenada-US E2 visa treaty. Due to various historical links between Grenada and the United States, the United States invaded Grenada in 1983, and as part of the peace treaty, entered into a treaty of trade and commerce in which the US E2 visa was memorialized. And maybe if we could just scroll forward a slide or two, one more please, into the table between the E2 and EB5. And the E2 visa treaty basically says if you invest in the United States as a Grenadian citizen in your own business, you, your spouse, and your children can move to the United States. There's no minimum investment required, but consuls expect to see an investment in excess of $150,000. You can obtain an E2 visa within 2 to 3 months. Again, it's your own business. Your children have education benefits. They can attend the public sector state schools at no cost. Universities, they can obtain in-state tuition rates depending on how long they've lived in the relevant state before admission. And the spouse can work anywhere in the United States subject to pre-authorization. And most importantly, given our audience today, if the main applicant doesn't spend, or any of the main applicant or his spouse doesn't spend 122 days in the United States, he's not subject to tax on his worldwide income, only on his US sourced income. And this is very different to the green card or the US permanent residency schemes, whereby from day one, you're taxed on your worldwide income. And a lot of changes happened to the green card program at the end of last year. The price increased from 500,000 to 1.8 million. Yes, there's an exemption if you invest in an area of targeted unemployment. So then it's at 900,000. But that money is locked away for a long period of time. Processing times for Chinese individuals can go up to 15 years. For people from Vietnam, it can go as high as 10 years. For people from the subcontinent, 5 to 7 years. So that's a significant long time before you can get to the United States. Your money's tied up without producing a return. And there's certain tax considerations which may or may not have been pointed out to you, which can really affect your position and really may need some careful consideration. To put on top of that, Mr. Trump's recent suspension of the L1 and the H1B, Grenada has become very topical in conversations because it's one of the most expeditious routes remaining to access the United States. So not only do you obtain a second citizenship today with Grenada, which provides you with the luxury of global mobility, it also provides you the utility of having access to the world's largest economy, being able to live in the world's largest economy, and be able to school your children in the world's largest economy, all within a combined 6-month period. And if you look at the costs, they're not significant in the grand scheme of things. You're required to make a $220,000 investment into our Six Senses resort in Grenada. Then there's some additional government fees depending on the composition of the family. That investment needs to be held for 5 years. Then you can liquidate your investment by selling it to another investor who also wishes to apply for citizenship, and you retain your citizenship in perpetuity. So it's not a costly exercise to obtain citizenship of Grenada. And then the US piece, it depends on what you're investing. You can buy a convenience store, or you can set up tens of millions of dollars into a factory. It's your business. Your profit and loss is determined on your effort. So it's a very convenient tool and a very flexible tool. And Sunita, that's why Grenada has become really popular in the last few weeks and months.
That's very, very compelling, Mohammed. But I have to ask you, objectively, considering the locations in which a lot of our clients are based, the locations range from, of course, the 54 countries of Africa, the Middle Eastern regions, some of which are unfortunately just facing unending civil wars. We also have the region of Southwest Asia, again, where a lot of people are now looking for alternative options. Traditionally, of course, the European popular destinations, Malta, for example, has now completed its quota. And then some of the destinations, including the UK that Kimia mentioned, as well as Yi over in Singapore. Why would people today prefer to look to, or should be looking to a scheme such as yours, or looking at the island of Grenada?
Sure, and I think that's a very fair question. And I think at the outset, individuals need to sit down and really see what are we looking to achieve by our second citizenship or our migration strategy. And if it's we want to live in the United Kingdom or we want to do business in the European Union, then definitely one of the European or the UK strategy is the right one for them. However, if they're looking at having a backup plan, an option B, with the ability to access the United States, then Grenada is definitely the right option for them. Why? One is the cost. If an individual is just looking for an option B, God forbid, political, economic, or social strife increase to a level where they're not able to tolerate that or it's beyond their risk tolerance, then why tie up 2.5 or 3 million euros in Cyprus today when you can achieve the same comfort blanket for 10% of the cost through obtaining a second citizenship in Grenada within a much more expeditious timeline of 2 to 3 months, rather than going through the rigmaroles of obtaining permanent residency and then taking the next step. So you get citizenship within 2 to 3 months. And I think that's really has to be understood by clients. There's two types of programs. One is citizenship first, and the other, you need to fulfill a period of residency with a physical presence for a number of days over a period of years, and then your citizenship is granted. So if you look at Portugal, it's a great place to live, and maybe that's the right option for a number of people. However, if you're looking for a second citizenship, it's 6 or 7 years before you obtain the document in your hand. So what we're actually seeing is individuals will progress with citizenship of Grenada. Then they will also add to that a European strategy by taking a golden visa, whether it's in Portugal or another European country. So they're combining it to get to the best of both worlds. And I think this is where working with a great firm like yourself really comes in. So when you describe the UK program, a lot of your clients will wish to go for that. And a lot of them may have challenges with the language tests. But with regards to the Caribbean, if they're a citizen of Grenada, there's no requirement to take a language test in the United Kingdom. So we've actually seen a lot of people take the Caribbean and then proceed with their tier one, especially individuals from South America. They've really looked at that. And in terms of where we, sorry.
Sorry, just I'm going to mostly be temporarily because we've got quite a few questions from the audience, including, mostly for you, Mohammed. One question says, are the government fees reduced for a single applicant as opposed to the 50,000 that you've got for a family of 4?
So that's a great question. So the government of Grenada recognized that most people come with their families. They're doing this for their children. So if you look at this, the slide in front of you, it's modular. However, the 50,000 is fixed, so it's up to 4 people. But then the due diligence fees, the application fees, they're all per person. So the differential total cost for a single or a family of 4 is minimal. It's like $20,000.
Okay.
So.
Someone else would like to know whether the E2 visa gives access to Canada.
No, unfortunately not. It's a US Pacific treaty.
Thank you.
But there we can connect the person who's making the inquiry to our Canadian team, who we also have within Stephenson Harwood. And in some ways, that's a great way, again, to demonstrate how, perhaps unlike other advisors, we have virtually all of the globe covered in-house without having to kind of outsource for expertise. So we'd be happy to connect you to our Canadian team if you need help.
And finally, there's a question, and I don't know if Kimmy is there because it's partly a question about both Cyprus and Grenada. But there is a family with a husband and wife who are 50 and 46 and children aged between 3 to 24. And whether they would be able to apply in Cyprus or Grenada and how that process would work.
To start off with Cyprus, the children that are up until the age of 24 can be included dependents because the limit is 28, but they'd have to show that they're in full-time education to still be dependents. That's obviously depending on their personal circumstances. There's no limit on the number of dependents, but it will obviously include additional government fees for them.
Thanks, Camille. And in Grenada?
Yeah, so in Grenada, your children are capped out at 30. Parents can be included at any age. There's no minor limit. You can also include your grandparents and your children, and you can also include your siblings in the same application. But there's different fees based on the ages and the family composition.
Okay, thank you. Sunita, back to your, I think you had another question before I interrupted.
Well, no, I was just actually wanting to capture a few things that Mohammed said and put into perspective for some of the people that are listening, for example, especially in the territories that I cover, which is what's very interesting, Mohammed, is that unlike some of the other territories, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand you correctly, it's quite useful to know and notice that the extension of the definition of the family actually is reflective of the culture and the families that we all work with, i.e. they are generally an extended family as opposed to perhaps in some cultures where it is parents plus one or two. So I think that's quite interesting to note. And at the beginning, Mohammed, I'm just conscious of time, but what I was saying is, of course, we were managing to gather some stats from various research tools and using Knight Frank, as I'd said earlier on. But you, of course, are doing this day in and day out. And where are you seeing the most traction from? And could you just quickly highlight, of course, without breaching confidentiality, but and of course you were not prepared for these questions, so feel free to say no politely. But could you give us a couple of examples of the kinds of families or groups of individuals that you are advising? I just think it would be helpful for, I'm just scanning through, looking at the names of some of our participants and recognizing some of them. And I think it would be helpful for them to kind of get a better feel, because a lot of people often just dismiss this as either being economically unfeasible or perhaps, as you said earlier on, not meeting the language criteria, which can be intimidating for quite a few people, especially if we're going back to that extended definition of the family. If we have people like us who are, you know, slightly senior, and we may not be able to get our heads around learning a whole new language. So just give us a real kind of off-the-cuff, authentic snapshot of what are you seeing? What is the range team seeing across the various territories where you're all based?
Sure, no, that's more than happy to answer it openly. We have 5 or 6 geographies where over the last 3 to 4 months, we've really seen an increase in demand. West Africa, South Africa, the Russian Federation, the subcontinent, India in particular, and in terms of Southeast Asia, individuals who have some sort of link to Singapore and China, of course, as well as second generations in the UAE and other Gulf states. And there's basically 3 or 4 typical sorts of investor at the moment. First of all is the individual who is in the African emerging markets. They're worried about increased political risk. They see more social unrest coming in as the full impacts of COVID manifest themselves. And again, it may not be a risk that they're willing to tolerate for their families. So the main head of the family will obviously remain in the emerging market in which he's doing business, but it provides him the ability to relocate the family. People from the subcontinent, I think they've been, the lockdown has been extended, and people are sitting there thinking, God, if this happened again, we need an alternative plan. And in addition to that, there's a number of other fiscal structuring measures which a Grenadian citizenship or second citizenship can provide, which is becoming really quite interesting. And then other people are seeing it as a tool to grow their business in the United States. I mean, this whole term deglobalization has become very topical and very popular. But if you have a Grenadian citizenship and you establish genuine links in the United States and you set up an arm of your business there under the E2 visa scheme, you are integrated into the fabric of that society. And you are, proving that the concept of deglobalization does exist, but you're maneuvering yourself to be able to continue your business, notwithstanding that. So a lot of people are looking at that maybe there'll be a large family, they're looking to send one of the children to the United States to run the arm there, and Grenada and E2 provides that. And then obviously you have the perennial thought process, which is, I'm doing this for my children. And in every single case, children always come in front and center to every decision.
Sure. But actually, based on questions from our audience, and thank you very much to one particular participant who's been very buoyant, actually, talk to us a little bit very quickly about the hotel, because somebody wants to know what is the return on investment, and quite right, it's your hard-earned cash, and what does this buy people? So in addition to obviously looking at the citizenship scheme, which, as you mentioned earlier, for some people actually it would be a very good hybrid option, given the way the world's going, to then sidestep onto somewhere else. But before I hand over to Emily to wrap up for us and to conclude, tell us a little bit about the luxurious development that you've got on in hand, Mohammed.
Sure, thank you. So I appreciate the question. We're building the Six Senses Resort in Grenada. Six Senses has been named as the world's #1 hotel brand by Travel and Leisure for the last 3 consecutive years. An investment is made into the real estate investment trust. There's a number of investors the government have allowed us to acquire under the Citizenship by Investment scheme. During construction of the hotel, we welcome you for 2 weeks a year at either the Park Hyatt in St. Kitts or Kempinski Dominica, and would really like you to come and spend some time with us. Once the Six Senses open, those stay rights transfer to the Six Senses in Grenada, and you earn a yield depending on the performance of the asset. So we expect that to start in about the 2% region and increase to 5% as the hotel stabilizes after year 3 or 4. And as I mentioned during the presentation, the opportunity for a capital exit arises after 5 years of you owning your share in the real estate investment trust, where you can sell it on to someone else who wants a citizenship. The hotel will be a 100-room, ultra-luxury hotel, very well designed in order to achieve natural distancing. It's 100 rooms over 28 acres, 30 swimming pools. There's no big dense structure. It's only 20% built up. And if you'd kindly share your details to the individuals who's asking the question, we will email you a full presentation on the opportunity afterwards, and we can discuss more.
That's great, and maybe we'll do a follow-up session when the world opens up from one of your new fancy hotels.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, Mohammed. A special note of thanks for me, and I'll hand over to Emily to wrap up for all of us. But thank you to everyone personally for me for joining and for supporting us, and I hope it's been invaluable.
Thank you, Sunita and Mohammed. So sharing it. So it's a bit grey in England, so that was very nice pictures of sunny islands. Thank you. As we've seen, there is an increasing demand for second passports and or citizenship from residents. There are various options available, and from listening to the experts today, it sounds like you might combine some of them. So you might start with one and then move on to another. As Mohammed said, it's always very important to find out what it is that you actually want, and then we can help see which of the options are the best for your circumstances. As I've said on the slide there, we're happy to help. I think we've had quite a few questions. I'm not sure, kind of probably out of time. I don't think there are any more at the moment. So if there's anything else, just like to say thank you to all of our speakers and thank you to everyone for joining us. I have said that we will circulate the slides after the webinar to anyone who would like them. And
I think our contact details are on the presentation.
Yeah, they are there. We're all at the end, looking in our official outfits, in our offices, and what home as we are at the moment. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will get this slide sent out to everyone.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
And,
Thank you.
And if I could just say a big vote of thanks to the Stephenson Harwood team. I've really appreciated the invitation. So thank you for the invitation.
We don't extend it to everyone, Mohammed. So the fact is that you were in the right place at the right time, and it's the reason why, just to wrap, ladies and gentlemen, is why we put this on today was very reflective and to deal with the demand that we find as family advisors and private client lawyers, that a lot of these types of issues and questions and options are posed to us time and time again, especially now in the past kind of 4 months. And it's something that we wanted to proactively just share some knowledge with all of you about. Perhaps some of you aren't aware that it's something that we do, or that we are indeed skilled and able to advise on. But also as lawyers, I think we give one final objective, holistic viewpoint, as opposed to just pushing clients down one particular road and saying, this is what you must do. Because of course, we have to come up with a bespoke solution for all of you. And so, no, I just hope it's been useful for everyone. And we really look forward to helping and working with all of you more. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.